Children colleagues, thank you for coming. Today, we traditionally represent, I mean the Bank of Russia, or subdivisions of the Bank of Russia, the Center of Monitoring and Response to Computer Attacks. We traditionally report about the FinCERT activities over the previous period. I would remind you that our reporting period is not very traditional. We started in September and it ends in September. I would like to open my presentation. Well, while they're working on it, I can say that FinCERT has changed significantly, both quantitatively and qualitatively. There's quite a lot of quantitative and qualitative changes, but naturally the mainstream activities remain the same. The main events that really were important for us during this year was the launching of an automated system conventionally known as SOE FinCERT. Why was it important for us? Because practically all the credit organizations work with incidents, quite often in an automated mode, and processing all the volume of information manually. Manually is next to impossible. It's also important that under the federal law, we as the Bank of Russia automatically collect information about all the fraudulent operations, and naturally it would be impossible to process all that information without automation. So the same basis has the anti-fraud function, which is all about operations without consent. For all that to work, the bank issued a standard according to which the banks form their notifications, and a regulation. FinCERT, or rather the Department of Information Security, has a function related to control and supervision. We have conducted about 120 inspections of financial organizations, and we found about 690 incompliances or findings. We work strenuously and we have very good results. These results translate into the annual report of the bank report and are submitted to the Security Council for them to understand the overall situation with information security in the country. There are two indicators, and that's the trust level by the clients to financial organizations from the standpoint of information security, and the ratio between unsanctioned operations to the total number of operations in electronic format. As of now, the results is 70% and 0.018%, and we enjoy growth in both parameters. And certainly the growth in the first parameter makes us happy, but speaking about the second result, we have something to think about. Apart from that, there are operational indicators that we monitor. Over 100 financial organizations joined FinCERT. I will describe them later. quite clearly, we can talk about all the credit organizations working with us in an automated mode. We can say that all the non-credit organizations have been connected to us. All the organizations that the Bank of Russia considers systemically important. Apart from that, we've always paid attention to the number of so-called active participants, those who report at least one incident every 6 months or send us reports at least twice every year, and the number of active participants has increased, although we did not spend much effort on that. Every second participant of the information exchange regularly report about cyber incidents or threats. That means they send 5 or 6 reports a year, and those are super active participants, and the participants sent FinCERT about 300,000 reports on different incidents. That does not mean that this equals the number of attacks, because attacks is a different story. But that means that monitoring on the level of credit organizations is good enough. They see the incidents that happen on their grounds, and they share information about those incidents. That's good material for subsequent analysis and for drafting information bulletins that we later submit to those organizations. And we started issuing those bulletins 3 times as often, and the number of bulletins on threats is quite big. About the participants of the information exchange, once again, those are all the credit organizations, important insurance company, all the mutual funds, all the payment systems. We closely collaborate with 3 telecommunications operators who are connected to us on a permanent basis. We increased the number of software developments this year, and over 100 other organizations participate in that information exchange. Those are the organizations who provide cybersecurity, the government authorities, and a lot of others. So the total number of our respondents that maintain constant communication with us is 826, and that means that the number of participants makes us leaders of global cybersecurity organizations. Funny as it sounds, we are practically the only cybersecurity organization that has such a number of participants, and we are in the top 10 of those organizations. Recently, our clients and the organizations that we supervise quite often reported cases of operations without the client's consent. This is different types of fraud. It's not always easy to identify the loss related to that fraud. It's not always easy to identify the victim, but this is the information that, according to the law, is sent further to the banks and financial organizations so that they can identify possible money laundering through the accounts of physical and legal entities that were specially set up for illegal operations, and quite a lot of other things. In fact, this is an indicator of the anti-fraud function. We have much yet to do, but already now we can say that Well, if you remember, the purpose of the law was to legalize this information exchange. Before the federal law was issued, such exchange existed, but it was on the level of mutual understanding between banks. We legalized it, formalized it, and now we can certainly say that the volume of information exchange compared to that quasi-legal exchange that was before is much greater. It has grown. When analyzing this information exchange, we understand that the main problem that exists in the financial industry is the social engineering. And we reconfirm our forecast that was made 2 years ago that this is the biggest problem, and it's aggravating, it's multiplying, and unfortunately the attempts made by us and by the law enforcement and financial organizations have reduced the tension of the problem, but cannot finally eliminate it. Despite that, we've done quite a lot of work in order to explain the root causes of that problem, how to fight this problem, and to explain what has to be done so that the clients don't lose their money. The main source for social engineering is the availability of information to the so-called callers of information. Well, such fraudulent people only need the name of the client, the telephone number, and it's not even necessary for them to know the account number. Well, they don't know the account number. They don't even need the card number. Our analysis shows that the leaks from databases of financial organizations over the reporting period have happened. We identified them, but this is not the number that allows those crooks to work on a mass scale. Unfortunately, it's quite easy to get information about people, and the report describes that in great detail. You can scan the social networks and websites that provides a lot of information about us. Secondly, it's the leaks from different databases, including, unfortunately, the databases belonging to state agencies, and it goes without saying that those are spy programs on websites which allow to read the information that we leave on those websites, and that's quite enough for the fraudulent people to work. It's quite easy to have a spy program on a website of an of a shop where you order things. Unfortunately, we forecast the development of this type of crime, and we only hope that our efforts jointly with the government agencies will bear certain fruit. I will answer the question that may arise, and that's the problem described in our report and recently identified with one of the banks. I will say no, because the reporting period ended much earlier than we could speak about any actions against that leak. 3 factors of a successful cyber attack. can be identified from the standpoint of social engineering. I talked about that at the session, and I will reiterate that. The culprit plays on the sense of fear when you're called and you're told that a transaction was made from your business, from your bank card, and you are afraid of losing money, and the criminal will do everything to unbalance you, playing on your feeling of fear. Others play on your greed. And it's quite clear that when you get a notification that you won in a lottery, and to get 1,000 rubles, please provide the full details of your bank card. Unfortunately, a lot of people are deceived by that. And thirdly, it's a reckless decisions. The criminal's purpose is to make you nervous and to make you make a fast decision, to make a decision here and now. What are the decisions by people usually? Either to provide all the information about themselves and their bank card, answering the SMS that came to them, or people go to an ATM and transfer the money themselves. And quite few people understand.
And they don't understand that at that point in time, they're transferring money to the violator or the plotter. As to fighting this possible crime, technical means are not always successful in tracing the behavior of the violators. And we as a central bank were aiming at the introduction of anti-fraud and anti-fraudulent operations in all the banks, and the introduction of this point into the law. But that is not enough. We consider that the only possible way to solve this problem is to raise the awareness of the population, and we're calling upon the lending organizations to pay special attention to that sort of crime. And I must say that the majority of such organizations realize the situation and are using different kinds of methods to fight possible crime. Introducing protection and security systems in ATMs. As far as domains are concerned, we're working in on the topics of phishing, and we have achieved significant success in this area. Previously, we have cut the time of working out and canceling the attack to 3 hours from 24, as was previously. As it was previously, it was 24 hours. So we see that the majority of domains working against our citizens are domains that were registered abroad, had been registered abroad, and the speed of breaking up the delegation or breaking up the attack, this is highly important because they don't hear us abroad and they don't want to do anything about it. So there is a threat in that department, and therefore we are supporting the law on blocking and the accounts. And the trend, as far as the trend is concerned, the trend that we can pinpoint within the last year is providing illegal sites, fraudulent sites, and we have been processing the appeals of different citizens asking us whether we could asking us whether they could name themselves as banks, and we realize that either they are being used or they simply don't understand that they're working in an illegal sphere. But we've been able to break the backbone of this trend. Approximately a year ago, fraudulent sites of insurance companies were in mainstream, but we'd managed to actually revert the situation. As far as social engineering is concerned, we can boast of certain achievements, but unfortunately, I must state that the problem is becoming more acute. The number of telephone numbers and the numbers for blocking have grown. And I must say that not all of the operators are actively cooperating with us. But we've managed, nevertheless, to reach positive results in this sphere. I'd like to call your attention to the figures in the report. They are the figures that have been substantiated by factual material. We cannot and must not work with numbers or situations where we're told to block because of a certain situation. If a bank reports to us that a particular fact had been substantiated, then we take action. The figure could have been higher, but we hadn't been able to cover all the phone numbers yet. We are continuing to work with our supervisory bodies, with the in the broadening of the information field and in resolving this problematic issue. All in all, that is about all I wanted to say. If there are any questions, I'll gladly answer them. Thank you. I'd like you to clarify some of the figures. In the report, you named 3 leaks of the base. Did you mean the leaks as of 2016, 2017? Well, the 3 that I have mentioned are the unique leaks of information. We are not basing these figures on the previous situations. These were the 3 unique situations that took place. But believe me, the numbers are really, on the figures are really insignificant. I'd like to clarify, FinCERT, after the cyber incident with the bank, connects and contacts the bank and gathers information on the supervisory bodies and the work of the supervisory bodies. So if there is something wrong, does FinCERT provide inspections to the bank? Because we see that sometimes the inspection had been provided and 3 bases were leaked. And what does FinCERT do about that? If there is an incident and we have immediately contacted the bank, we provide supervisory inspections, but also if there is a necessity to provide the bank with support, there is such a possibility. It is important to note that there has to be a really serious condition that allows us to step in. Well, the leak in client information is quite a difficult situation. Apart from that, we have established contacts with supervisory bodies and distance contact. That might be enough to gather the necessary information about the incident. The main aim, as far as supervision is concerned, is not the detection of a hacking device. That is not the goal. The main focus of our attention is placed on the corporate governance and on the fact that corporate management is managing its risks and whether it can, within this framework, detect the incident and provide for the resolution of the problem. Otherwise, it's not really necessary sometimes to contact a particular bank. All we have to do is get the necessary information, analyze it, and on the basis of this analysis, we can make our conclusions. Apart from that, we have the necessary framework of reporting. We provide the necessary figures from the reporting and which are sent then to central bank. And the breakthrough topic, we haven't seen any figures on the breakthroughs. Do you mean singular fraudulent operations with individuals or for individuals on the individual's account? It's not that we are not monitoring this situation. We know about it. And for the banks, as I say, we have a number of particular norms and laws, recommendations from a central bank as to how to avoid such situations. And within the supervisory activities, we provide for the foundation of inspection based on particular information that we're supplied with. But obviously these are not the figures that we enter into the report. Good afternoon, Tatiana Manaenko, the PLUS Journal. At the cybersecurity forum, a lot was discussed as far as collaboration is concerned. Has anything changed? Have banks started collaborating with each other and sharing information on the leaks of data? I'd like to get back to one of the slides in my presentation, which is dedicated to the topic. 19,000 messages. Wouldn't that count as a good result as far as collaboration is concerned? We don't hold on to the information. When we receive the information, it is checked, and then it is distributed amongst all the participants of the information exchange. The members, above all, are interested in getting access to such information. What we need to take in mind is that we need to improve on these figures. Thank you very much. Good Good afternoon, Kovalyov Alexander, VTB Bank. One of the slides depicted a figure on detected fraudulent calls, which were then the information about which was transmitted to the law enforcement bodies. And are you planning to study this information and improve on these figures? Well, this is the number of the blocked numbers, telephone numbers. This is the figure that reflects the blocked telephone numbers. Operators don't block singular particular individual situations. There are a number of numbers that operators avoid blocking, that especially operators in mobile operators in the Moscow region. And therefore, we are going to initiate the introduction of changes into the law on communication, which would adequately address the situation. As to the substitution of numbers, telephone numbers, in the majority of cases, we deal with these particular situations, and operators are not really supporting us. And obviously, we are going to advocate the introduction of certain changes and amendments into the law in order to address the situation. Maxim Turchininov, Metallinvest Bank. Banks regularly receive lists of terrorists, non-bona fide legal entities and individuals. Wouldn't it be better to transfer these blacklists, so to say, to acquirers and to payment systems in order to provide for blocking of these real-time, of the transactions real-time? And the second question is, wouldn't it be better to incentivize the following? There are certain applications which block fraudulent calls. Maybe it would become possible to receive online distribution of such lists, which would decrease the number of fraudulent operations coming from such call centers. As far as your second question is concerned, it's an interesting topic. We have not yet discussed it with the mobile operators. As far as the first question is concerned, the law is built in such a way that, devised in such a way that banks are obliged to share this information. We organize the distribution of this information, and then banks are obliged to distribute this material amongst legal entities and individuals. But the bank chooses its own way, and that is quite right, because quite correct, because we cannot say how your system operates and what is the structure of your system. And the other thing, we cannot state we cannot definitely state that the account will receive illegal information. It can be a perfectly legal account, but for a specific reason, it had been brought into light as a fraudulent operation. For instance, in the case where the money was transferred from one account, counterfeit operation and fraudulent operation, and the money was transferred from one account to the other, where the head of the organization wasn't even aware that it was happening. So when we were working on the law, we proceeded from the fact that every bank has its own risk model, risk aversion, and what we receive does not immediately instigate the blocking of an account, but it is a reason to look into the account and ask the question, where does this money come from? Where has it been transferred from?
A small comment. When we get the money, it's clear that the money is most probably have gone. So it's a post factum thing. We understood that these guys are crooks, but several thousand people have lost their money. Yes, we understand that problem. If you remember when we drafted the anti-fraud law, we tried to regulate this issue. Unfortunately, the legal community said that they're not ready to support us. Yet we hope to come back to this subject. There are certain issues there. Firstly, it's really a chain of transactions, because the money, we understand that the money go from one bank to another, and to the fourth and the fifth, or sometimes go to the electronic wallets, and so on and so forth. So it's a chain, and the question of returning the money to the physical person is difficult. So we are ready to resume discussions on this. Yes, there's another question. The question on Form 203. For instance, there are situations when the client calls back their claim when they figure out what happened, and what happens with this further. Well, everything is okay. Are you just mark this as called back so that we exclude it from the list of investigations? We didn't find that function. Well, let's discuss that separately. Colleagues, any more questions? My colleague raised an interesting issue. Were there a lot of cases when the banks called back the licenses? Also, there were apprehensions that this would be a blacklist. No, there weren't many cases like that, but there were. And we are working very actively with it. There are cases when the numbers of accounts got on that list by mistake, and we have an exclusion procedure. So we never make that mistake. Colleagues, any more questions? Yeah? Is there? No? Well, colleagues, then thank you very much for your attention, and have a good day.